There will be so many businesses that are realized, encapsulated by NFTs. And so we need to look to every sector of the economy that has intermediaries that are extracting too much value in a transaction flow, or that are impeding innovation by being a 1,000-pound gorilla, slowing down change. And every one of those are going to be disintermediated by this new technology, right-sized.
All right, GM, everyone. We have an incredible guest today, Joe Lubin, founder, CEO of ConsenSys, and the co-founder of Ethereum. We were fortunate enough to have Joe speak at the inaugural edition of the Gateway last year at Miami Basel, and so really excited for our conversation today.
Me too.
Well, let's jump into it, because there's no shortage of things to talk about. Why don't we start at the very top? What makes blockchain valuable?
Blockchain is valuable essentially to make a small point that it's going to drive a paradigm shift that changes everything on planet Earth. And it's blockchain, it's decentralized protocols. The core value proposition of blockchain is trust. And we spent years, some of the early years in the ecosystem, trying to come up with how to name that sort of trust. We had trustless, trust minimized, trustful, trustworthy. You don't need to trust anybody, but really it's a new invention. It's decentralized trust, and you can only get that from a new kind of database. So for millennia, the world has operated based on centralized trust, centralized systems where there's an authority. The authority imbues legitimacy, trust in a whole bunch of intermediaries in an economy, in society. They all have their own databases. And they write down in the databases who owns what, who has what privileges, and that's a great system. Top-down command and control has enabled us to build astonishing things, and thank you for making use of these astonishing things for this event. But all these astonishing things don't serve everybody well. They're not accessible by everybody, and I think we can do better. In 2008, 2009, Satoshi invented a new kind of database. It was an open, decentralized database, and it enables everybody to inspect what happened and when with respect to any transactions built in systems on top of that database. And so that will drive a paradigm shift where initially the trust vector was top down from the authorities. Now the trust vector has been turned bottom up from the grassroots. We're seeing the democratization of trust, and this database is enabling the democratization of finance, global finance, in the form of decentralized FI. And one of the beauties of these systems is that if the database is massively decentralized enough, then unlike all those databases that the trusted third-party intermediaries maintain, you can be certain that it is enormously economically expensive to overturn the history of these databases. And centralized systems throughout history are rife with the intermediaries cheating by changing ledger entries in those databases. And so what we're seeing is a new trust foundation enabling a new global decentralized finance system, which has been democratized. And we're seeing the first incursion, the first crossing of the chasm of this technology into mainstream culture. And that's what we're all doing here. So the first industry affected is creatives, basically content creators, content owners, the entertainment industry. By that, I also mean athletes who are kind of content creators themselves. And so there's a paradigm shift going on. Tip of the spear, as it usually is, are the artists who can either reflect to us who we are or show us a path forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love that explanation. You know, a lot has changed in the year since we were last at the Gateway. There's obviously no shortage of negativity swirling around the crypto and Web3 space with recent events. How do you feel the collapse of FTX will impact the crypto space, and what lessons can we learn from it?
So mixed feelings, I guess. A lot of people have been harmed badly, and I think we should look at it in context. A lot of people have been harmed for millennia by bad centralized systems. If you can hide information, you can cheat in so many different ways. And so the FTX debacle wasn't a point event. It stems back all the way to Terra Luna and other kinds of collapses that we've seen. Some of those companies weren't corrupt, but had bad practices. Those bad practices should have been regulated. They should have been exposed. Some other companies were kind of corrupt, including FTX in different ways. And so I think we should also be grateful. I'm grateful that it is going to enable us to drive a narrative that really lays out in stark terms the value of decentralization versus how easy it is for centralized systems that manage other people's money, whether they're legally allowed to or not, how badly they can behave or how badly they can fail. So it's up to us. We're working at ConsenSys to craft narratives, to speak to regulators about what we can learn from this system. So Sam Bankman-Fried was an effective altruist, and I think we owe an enormous debt of gratitude to him for sacrificing himself, creating the most egregious abuse in history, not just blockchain history, but financial history, and enabling us to point to all of the things that you can do badly, whether he was evil or not. But CeFi, bad. So not bad. CeFi is money, crypto. There are good CeFi projects. It's valuable to onboard the early majority mainstream people to understand and utilize and benefit from this technology. But the core of what we're doing and have been doing for many years is decentralization. It's DeFi. DeFi constructs can be used by regulators and CeFi organizations to track assets, to disclose both assets, reserves, and liabilities, where liabilities are much more difficult. We're going to need to put our heads together and figure out a protocol where organizations can disclose liabilities without reducing their competitive advantage. You don't want your trader adversary to know what you're holding, but I think we can get there. There's a pall over the ecosystem right now. I think in the new year, we turn that into the opportunity to help regulators and other global leaders to understand how good all this is and how they should have an adversarial relationship with CeFi, but DeFi, or the people in our ecosystem who are proponents of decentralization, we're kind of on the same team as the regulators. We're trying to empower consumers and institutions, and we're trying to protect them.
Absolutely. In your eyes, what does sensible regulation for this space look like?
So I'm not a regulator, and I would love to see us in our ecosystem make use of the technology to do things that self-regulate, whether it's single companies doing it or whether it's groups of companies doing that, potentially putting together a protocol to disclose liabilities in a safe and prudent way. CeFi organizations absolutely need to be regulated because they are in the business of bringing money into the ecosystem, whether it's institutional money or retail money, and there will always be the opportunity to screw up unintentionally or intentionally, and regulators need to be watching. But importantly, technology should not be regulated. Uses of technology can and often should be regulated, but innovation shouldn't be slowed or stymied, and you should not be looking to censor or sanction or otherwise restrict innovation when it comes to building software, publishing software, etc.
Absolutely, absolutely. In recent weeks, there was a lot of conversation around MetaMask and Infura and the privacy policy with data collection. I know that you made a thread on this subject, but just wanted to give you a chance to clear it up for us and address it.
Sure, I can answer that briefly, and I'm sure my colleagues are in our PR group are stressing about that question. But we actually have some things that we're really proud to say next week. The first thing is that there was a lot of misunderstanding. So there's misunderstanding because we issued a communication because we were at the darkest moment in our ecosystem. We were at peak FUD, peak paranoia, the depths. So I've informally called, what was it, last Tuesday? Basically, the nadir of our ecosystem, called that the low. I think I don't know that we're up only from here, but I feel like most of the major shoes, based on my understanding of who was exposed and who had vulnerabilities, I don't think we're going to see any major downturns. And I think from here it's about settling amongst ourselves and helping regulators put in a floor and a foundation for the ecosystem. We have never monetized personal information directly. We never commercialized that. Any information that we take in, we use to serve the user better. There's information that we need for transactions, for processing transactions, and we never store information. Infura never stores information for the simple things that we do, like reading data and sending it back to a wallet. But when we're processing transactions, we need to make sure that those things don't fall to the ground. We need to make sure that if there are reorgs, that we're tracking those things. So it's all about building a better product and serving the user better. And we do. So MetaMask serves more users, more better than any other systems. The percentage of transactions that we achieve completion on is much higher than any other system. So when things are going well, we might drop 1 or so or less than that percent of transactions to the ground just because blockchain is complicated. When the blockchain is really challenged, we can drop up to 3 or 4%. Most other systems, even going directly to the protocol, they're dropping 15 or 20%. So MetaMask is great because it's best execution. And no, we do not log all the addresses and immediately. We only log information related to a transaction, and we actually have engineers working right now to figure out how we can shrink the window and where we log that information.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Something that's really stuck with me from last year's Gateway, I remember speaking to you afterwards, and you said that it was one of the most significant incursions into the legacy world that you'd seen. As someone who, we have a shared desire to see this technology go mainstream. That's part of our mission at NFT Now, is to bring this from niche to mainstream. I'm curious, how do you visualize mainstream adoption? Like, what does that look like for you, and how do you feel NFTs are uniquely situated to help bring this technology into the mainstream?
Yeah, so NFTs are a profound construct, in computer science. So in the olden days, when you're writing software, sometimes you would want a software object to have a unique identifier. So we called them globally unique identifiers, or GUIDs. But it was only globally unique amongst the little piece of software that you were writing. Now we have this construct, non-fungible tokens, which are globally unique on the planet, perhaps in the solar system, perhaps further. We'll see how that goes. Essentially, this invention of decentralized trust has enabled us to do something called decentralized or scarcity, or digital scarcity. And that is not just going to apply to wrapping a piece of art or a piece of music, but it's also going to enable intelligent agents to be able to interact with financial instruments to pay other agents or people or organizations to take in money. A globally unique ID like an NFT can represent a DAO, perhaps. And so we're going to see many businesses being built essentially into what we currently consider NFTs, but they'll be generalizations of NFTs. And what this early phase of NFT utilization and adoption is doing is it is we were talking in the green room that this period in our ecosystem, people keep trying to map it back to the .com era, and we used to say, hey, we're in 1994, hey, we're in 1997, things haven't really hit yet, but we've surged pretty quickly. We've seen a lot of irrational exuberances and corrections. We saw a massive irrational exuberance recently, followed by a geopolitical event or set of events, followed by a massive global economic collapse. And that feels very much like 2001. What happened after 2001 was that 2001 dot-com boom and bust. What happened was all these great projects that drove so much irrational exuberance, so much excitement, so much speculation. There's a lot of learning there, a lot of learning based on failure, but a lot of excitement and mapping out potential future. And we've gone through a few phases of that. We are now in this creative destruction phase where all the pieces get recombined. A lot of people with expertise from a few years are now figuring out right things to do. And so we're in this phase where we're not dreaming about the future and telling people how great the future is going to be, but we're actually building like 2000, the aughts, basically 8 years, 10 years, where the e-commerce economy, the web economy was built. We're now building the Web3 economy. And so you're a significant part of that, and the NFT space is a significant part of that. And brands are going crazy right now for not cryptocurrency so much, not DeFi yet, but associating themselves with this new sense of community and essentially finding real ways to drive business based on the foundations that they see here.
Absolutely. I always say you don't bet against art, music, and culture.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, look, it's been a big year for Ethereum. We're now a couple months removed from the merge. What happens next?
I could take that in so many different directions. So the merge was the last major piece of uncertainty in the Ethereum ecosystem. So many people, naysayers, detractors, realists, were like, there's no way that you're going to be able to land that incredibly complex transition, and it went very well. What it did was it removed a lot of uncertainty. It put Ethereum on the world stage. So many major global publications were covering it. Many of the journalists knew what was going on. Many others did not, but they knew something really big was happening because all the people they respected thought something really big was happening. So they knew something internet scale was happening. And it paved the way to infinite scalability. Scalability has been an issue. We built a system that was, in a sense, a prototype system that enabled us to figure out so many different things. And it is a piece that is really driving the acceleration of what I call modularization in our technology. So we started out with this big monolithic blockchain where everything was in the protocol, and we started teasing little pieces apart. Engineers basically like to modularize things. They can get built better, more robustly, and they can perform much better, faster. So we're seeing the trust module teased out. We're seeing the execution module teased out. The trust module is Ethereum 1, and essentially even that is modularizing into submodules where you're going to have block builders, block proposers, validators. The execution layer is being teased out. So all these layer 2s and layer 3s being built above them enable us to add new compute resources to this blockchain ecosystem. And similar to the internet, where you can add new computers to the internet and you get more transaction throughput capacity, we can now do that for blockchain, and we'll get to hundreds of thousands and effectively infinite transactions per second in that sort of environment. Another piece is data availability. So these layer 2 rollups, they need to refer to data on the blockchain or somewhere, and that data can be guaranteed. You can have strong guarantees or weaker guarantees, or you can bring your own data in certain ways. And so that whole macro module is modularizing itself, and we'll see things like restaking of Ether and data availability layers. And so there's a lot of talent, engineering talent, being brought to building essentially the next infrastructure for the planet.
Absolutely. You know, some of the biggest criticisms of Ethereum were the environmental concerns and scalability. Obviously, the former has now been addressed with the merge, and Ethereum's on trajectory to address the second as well. So I'm curious, like, given Ethereum's trajectory, do you believe that the future is multi-chain? And if so, what role do other chains play, and what factors should be weighed?
Sure. We've been saying the future is multi-chain for a long time, and ConsenSys is it's a decentralized protocols company. We started as an Ethereum company because that was the best, most expressive technology out there for a long time, and we kept looking at offering infrastructure for different protocols, and they just weren't getting the traction. So it didn't make sense for us to apply scarce resources when we could just build stuff we cared about in the Ethereum ecosystem. Lots of projects have adopted pieces of the Ethereum technology. There are other projects out there that are good projects. It's important to explore the solution space broadly, so that maybe there's something brilliant out here that's way better than everything else, or maybe there's a piece here that you can bring back and make everything much better. Yes, multi-chain world. I've been calling Ethereum metropolitan Ethereum recently, and that's because lots of different blockchain technologies are getting built at layer 2 and higher and anchoring into Ethereum layer 1, and they can get the full security guarantee of Ethereum. there are other technologies through bridges that have different approaches and that are doing valuable things. I don't think there will be that many layer ones because layer one is where you get this new form of trust from, decentralized trust, and you need a massively decentralized layer one in order to really trust it. If you're going to put valuable assets like NFTs, if you're going to put valuable protocols on a platform, you're not going to choose a platform that is numerically half as secure as this other platform when you can attach a new network to that and get the full security. So we will see Ethereum being a major hub to so many different systems. We'll probably see one or a handful of others. Bitcoin will stick around. I think of Bitcoin not so much as a programming platform, but as essentially the world's most valuable NFT. So similar to gold, where it's the world's most, not even, well, a very valuable substance that we can all agree on. We can divide it up, fractionalize it, and we can all hold a piece of the gold non-fungible metal.
A store of value,
Exactly,
yeah.
It's a store of value. So Bitcoin, because it's such a brilliant invention and it represents a moment in time, is something that we can all hold a piece of, and we can use it in ways similar to how we use gold. And there'll be some functionality, I think, built on top of that. There's a guy named John, I'm forgetting his last name. It'll come to me in a minute. But somebody's actually looking at taking the roll-up technology and trying to run it on Bitcoin. It would need protocol changes for Bitcoin, but that doesn't happen very often. So maybe Bitcoin will be more functional, but there will be a few of them.
Sure. Tell us a bit more about ConsenSys, the mission there and how your strategy has shifted since its inception.
Sure. ConsenSys has been around since about a year into the Ethereum ecosystem, and we started by realizing, hey, there's nothing here. We were trying to build applications, and there were no developer tools, there was no infrastructure, there were no test nets, and so we had to do all of that ourselves. Back then, you would have to, if you built a little product, and I used the term product very loosely back then, so like a demonstration product, you'd have to ask your users to go and download the Ethereum client to your laptop, sync the client to the network. That could take hours, days in some cases, and then type in this URL and you'll hit a user interface and then you're away. And so we were building a bunch of different demonstration products in our company and trying to create a lot of different test nets and some industrious people said, hey, why don't we create our own test net that we can all use? That evolved over a year or so into a product called Infura. And so Infura set out to essentially pay all the AWS bills for the ecosystem for a few years and figure out how to build scalable infrastructure for blockchain and make it easier for developers to build without having to run their own blockchain DevOps or run their own infrastructure. We did similar things with Truffle. We built developer tools. MetaMask was a very early project that was conceived to just make it easy for people to do certain transactions on the blockchain. It has evolved into being our digital authority in the Web3 space. Everything that we do on blockchain is user-centric, and so we can sign a transaction and authorize whatever we want to authorize. And so we currently operate essentially a flywheel where we have developer tools, including Infura and Truffle and some other things, to facilitate the development of applications. So more developers, more applications, and then we provide the major non-custodial user interface in MetaMask. So these are your keys, and you own everything, and we can't touch any of your stuff. That would be improper. Somebody should tell Sam that, perhaps. But we run this flywheel where more applications, more users, etc.
Well, we've got just about 30 seconds left, so real quick answer. What excites you most about the future of NFTs?
The future of NFTs are, again, it's my expanded definition of NFTs. I love that they are containers for art. I think Cooper's talking later. I think the music industry is going to transition to becoming NFT based, and nobody's going to realize how it's transitioned. It'll just be like MP3s and then Spotify and Apple Music, etc. But the next stage is really going to empower the creator. So look forward to music blowing up the NFT space. That could be our next major wave for our ecosystem. But more than that, there will be so many businesses that are realized, encapsulated by NFTs. And so we need to look to every sector of the economy that has intermediaries that are extracting too much value in a transaction flow, or that are impeding innovation by being a 1,000-pound gorilla, slowing down change. And every one of those are going to be disintermediated by this new technology, right-sized at least.
Thank you. Everyone, give it up for Joe Lubin.
Thanks, everyone.